Okay, good evening. Welcome to our council meeting. It's Monday, October 7th, 2024. Would you join me in the salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll have Pastor Lloyd Hoskins from the First Christian Church give us our invocation tonight.
Let's turn to God in prayer. Oh God, you have drawn us together to be the community of Augusta, Kansas. And I ask that you continue to draw our hearts and our minds together in unity so that we may seek what is best for all in our community. On issues in which we may disagree with others, may we still be willing to listen with open minds so that we can see through the eyes of others. Be with these members of the City Council as they serve as our leaders who make important decisions for us. Thank you for blessing us, God, and lead us on the paths that will bless others. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Okay, we need to review our city council meeting minutes from September 16th.
May I make a motion to approve the minutes of the September 16, 2024 City Council meeting?
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve those minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Appropriation Ordinance Number 9A dated September 25th. We can approve that, hopefully.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I make a motion to approve appropriation ordinance number 9A dated September 25th. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. It's Fire Prevention Week, October 6th, which is today through the 12th. And I'm just going to remind you all at home to change the batteries in your smoke detectors and check your fire extinguishers and see if they're needing any repairs or replacements. And don't play with matches. Thank you for that. That'll take us down to our visitors, and Sue Jones is here to talk about the Feral Cat TNVR.
Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening. So you have a very detailed report on the activities that Animal Control and I conducted for 6 months. Your money has been spent. You laugh, Sean. We trapped 106 cats and neutered and spayed those. And of those, the females, we had 35 that were pregnant, 38, 24 that were pregnant. And by our activities, we avoided the birth of another 104 cats in the city of Augusta. So in 6 months, we effectively impacted the life cycle of 210 cats. And I'd say that's pretty good. Any questions? Well, as you can see on the second page, we have identified areas that we know that there are still cats. We focused a lot on 5 different areas, but there are still a few hangers-on out there. We noticed kittens at the very end, but with funds running low, we did as much as we could. And then there have been reports of 3 new areas that we need to focus on when funding comes available in January. So if you would like to have us continue through the end of the year, we'd be happy to do that with some additional funding. Otherwise, we'll wait until January. Comments, questions?
Do you trap black and white cats?
We trap any color that you would like. Why, do you have one that, oh, you are talking about skunks? No, 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 no. We are very selective in that. We do trap black and white kitties, but not black and white skunks.
Okay.
So,
We have a family of those in our neighborhood.
yes, we have some as well.
Yes.
Plus
So we-
possums, plus raccoons.
Yeah,
So, okay, well, I think it was a good project,
good.
and I
Good.
look forward to continuing it. So, have you been sold, Sean?
I think I have.
Okay,
We've,
good.
we've had a conversation.
Yes, we did.
So you have make any progress on the possibility of a 501(c) or any progress
We
on
have
that?
started looking into at doing that. We're trying to decide whether to have a 3 or a 5 person board. That's one of the decisions that needs to be made. I probably will have a 5-person board. One member of the board definitely will be animal control officer.
Okay.
So that's appropriate.
He'll help you.
Thank you.
So anybody else would like to be on
Kip-
that? Would
Kip-
you like to
Kip
be on
said-
that?
Kip said that he would like to.
Would you? Seriously? Okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. And I look forward to starting this again in January.
Thanks. Sue.
You're welcome.
Are there any other visitors here tonight that don't have something on the agenda already?
There is one other thing I'd like to say.
Okay,
And the chief is, I've told this to the chief as well. We have an awesome animal control officer, and we should do everything possible to maintain, to keep her. And she will be sorely missed when she goes on leave at the end of this month. So she does an amazing job for the city and for the animals. Our euthanasia rate is virtually 0. She has networked with animal rescue organizations all across the state. And she finds places for dogs to go, and she finds places for cats to go. So that's a real tribute to the city.
thank you. Thank you very much. That moves us down to our first item of business, which is acceptance of the bid for Redbud Trail pedestrian bridge over US 54 and the authorization of payment to KDOT. Staff?
Yes, Mayor and Council, this item is related to a recent action that you took at our prior council meeting. If you recall, we had initialized with a resolution a bond sale in order to pay for our local match requirement for the first Redbud Trail pedestrian bridge, the one being installed over the highway. The bid opening was the day after, or maybe 2 days after, I can't remember. I think it may have been 2 days after that meeting, but we were initiating the process so that we would have our money when we needed to have it. So the actual bid opening where we got contractor numbers came a couple of days after that meeting. And if you recall, our initial financing plan was based on an expected cost match in the $850,000 range. And what I'm presenting to you tonight are the actual numbers coming from those bids that happened a day or two later. So there were multiple bids on the project, I believe 3 total. The low bid was submitted from Don Langer and Sons Construction in the amount of $1,533,553. All of the bids came in below the city or the engineer's estimate, and actually the low bids came in significantly below the engineer's estimate. And so the result of that bid is that we have a 20% match on the construction part of the project, and that includes the construction engineering. When you add the actual bid together with the construction engineering cost, instead of the $840,000 that was expected, our match is $328,000. At that funding level, I believe I sent out an email update once those bids came out. At that funding level, it doesn't make sense for you to actually do any kind of bonding for that project. It's a low enough number that there's a lot of inefficiency in the bonding, but it's also a low enough number that you have the ability through a combination of these other sources to pay for it 100% and be done with it. And so what I did is I contacted bond counsel and I asked them to put a pause on any actions regarding that bonding until council could look at the revised financial plan tonight. And so they haven't taken any steps towards that. And the financial plan is presented here in this staff report. So the original Schwab Eaton design contract, they were the ones that were doing the design engineering for us. It's finishing below estimate as well, probably closer to $215,000, but I left a little bit of room in case there's any documentation or finagling or stuff right here at the last minute as they finalize all of the paperwork. But we're not expecting much more off of their contract, and so I've just put a round number of 230 for our estimate. But again, that was below their original contract cost. We had a boundary survey that we had to do that's related to the second phase of the project, which was the Williams refinery property that they were donating. So we did a boundary survey, and that cost the $2,588. And then what you have from the bids that just occurred is the local match requirement for the TA grant, which is $328,000. So those are all of the expenditures on the project, which total $560,588. Okay. And if you remember when we did the original resolution going back over a year ago, phase one included the bridge over the highway and also some preliminary design work on the bridge over the river, which is why I grouped the Godecki boundary survey cost into this mix, so you understand where that's coming from. All right, so that's the expenditures up at the top. The financial plan down below is presented right here. So first, we received a $250,000 commitment from the city of Andover. They had already paid $80,000 in 2023, with the other $170,000 planned to be paid and invoiced in January of 2025. So that's coming up here in a couple of months where they will provide the remainder of that contribution. We have already submitted 2 years worth of federal fund exchange. The first one was only about $3,500 because that's all we had available in 2023. But maybe about 2 months ago, you approved the submittal for the 2024 year of about $115,000. So those revenues together make up that $118,000. Now, the next two items that are italicized, this is essentially the new financial proposal as opposed to the bond issue that we were looking at the last meeting. We have a small balance remaining of our federal ARPA funding. If you remember, we held back like $300,000 to do our ADA transition plan update. That was being paid for with the ARPA monies. And the actual bids for that, what got submitted was like $109,000. And then in a subsequent meeting, since we had money left over from ARPA funding, we allocated about $50,000 towards, I think it was our loader purchase, so that would help cover the cost for that piece of equipment. So we have a balance remaining for the ARPA funding, which again is more federal grant money. And because that has to be encumbered for expense by the end of this year, we need a project to apply it to. So you could simply apply it towards this project and help bring that balance down. So what you're left with then is the difference between the total expenditures and those three revenue sources, which right now is roughly $52,000. My proposal for that would be, as originally planned, in 2025, use a portion of your federal fund exchange dollars, which should come available probably in February of 2025. And that will cover the remaining gap on the project. So from all of those sources, City of Andover's contribution, and then these three line items here, which are all federal sources, you can pay off the entire project, be done with it. We submit our check to KDOT, and the only thing that would remain is if they have any change orders during construction. So that's the only thing left on there. And anyway, so I think that's a better proposal with the way that those bids came in, to be able to finish the project off that way and not have to do anything with our local bonding. And so I just wanted to provide that update and walk you through the financial plan. So the action tonight is twofold. It's essentially to accept the award, or sorry, to accept the low bid from Donlinger and Sons Construction, authorize staff and the mayor to sign all the documents and to release the payment to KDOT, because we pay our match into KDOT, and then they essentially administer the costs and stuff from there, and then they send us a reconciliation towards the end if there's any difference from that $328,000. So it's award the bid, authorize that payment and all of the paperwork, and then authorize the revised financing plan. And then that's how we will proceed to pay the project off over the next 3 to 4 months. So with that, Mayor and Council, I will turn it over to you for any questions or discussion. And we're here to provide any information you need.
Council, any questions?
Josh, a couple questions. On that motion, do you need that as separate motions, or is that allowed to be in all one motion?
I'm fine with it all being one.
Okay. And then secondly, I've had some questions in the community regarding the TA grant and the acronym for Transportation Alternatives Grant. So the scope that grant supports, so the grant exists to support transportation alternatives. So broadly speaking, what types of projects is that intended to be used for, and what is it not intended to be used for from a transportation?
Yeah, so there's actually multiple. So look at transportation alternatives as kind of an umbrella term for a program.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there are multiple categories under transportation alternatives that can be funded, but the reason you hear the word alternative, it's generally geared towards transportation projects that are not meant to service vehicles. It's geared towards pedestrian orientation, people, essentially different ways of moving people around. So you'll see a lot of trails, you'll see sidewalk projects, those sort of things. You may see complete streets designs, bike lanes, a lot of different projects like that. Now, they may have a street project or something that gets grouped into that, as long as it incorporates a lot of those other sort of characteristics we are dealing with pedestrian enhancement. So that's one or two of the categories. Then they also have a category that we've benefited from before, whereas historic restorations or historic transportation facilities. And so with the Frisco Depot in 2017, we actually secured a transportation alternatives grant to rehabilitate that. And it was because of its historical significance as a transportation facility. So that's a special little niche of a category that they have there as well.
Perfect. So general road construction, general road maintenance would not have been necessarily a broad brush that this grant money would have been eligible for, without tying it back to one of those niches or one of those other project alternatives that you're talking about.
Well, grants are very specific. So you have to submit a grant application for a specific project. You don't just submit something that says, hey, we need money for transportation, and then you get it and can spend it on anything transportation. We had to submit a very specific project, which was these bridges.
Right.
So that's the best way I can answer it. Your grants are always very specific to the project, and there's a whole lot of narrative tied to it that you have to justify the project to the state. And what I would say generally what they're looking for is projects that align with the program goals that they are trying to fund. So if you end up getting money through these various programs, it's probably because you have a project that aligns with the state's vision and the things that they're trying to achieve with their transportation system. And you're seeing that all the way up to the federal level with pedestrian infrastructure and trails and interconnectivity that isn't strictly tied to vehicles.
Perfect, thanks.
Anybody else? Somebody want to make a motion to do all that?
Mr. Mayor, make a motion, to consider acceptance of the low bid by Donlinger and Sons Construction Incorporated for the construction of the Redbud Trail pedestrian bridge over US 54 and authorize payment to the Kansas Department of Transportation for the City of Augusta's matching funds of $328,000.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
One,
All
One.
those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
one question, Mr. Mayor. I think you
Yes.
stopped at the 328 and didn't keep going through the revised financial plan.
I didn't have that one, so.
Okay. Do we need to read further past that? Because
Well, we can make another motion real quick.
I can combine it if that was the intent, if that's what you
Sean
wanted
made the
to,
motion.
Yeah, that was the intent.
to accept the low bid and authorize the payment to KDOT.
Correct.
And is that what? the
And
second was?
terminate the go bond issue. Right. It's all of those things.
And your second is for that same thing?
Yeah.
That works.
Thank you, gentlemen.
We just did it.
So with that, my vote is aye. I did not vote in there till we were clear.
Okay.
She was not.
There's a question as to whether we could move business item 5 up to take business item 2 place.
Yes.
Thank you. Do we need a motion to do that? That's what I thought.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to move number 5, the discussion regarding operating agreement with Go Augusta for the Augusta, Kansas Welcome Center and the Frisco Depot up to the next business item.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Who was the second? And Martin, you voted in opposition?
No. I voted.
And the reason we did that is our new Go Augusta person is here.
We didn't want her to wait all night.
Yeah. Okay. Let me get to it.
I couldn't hear anything.
That's what I was wondering. We were just wanting to move her up quicker. That's all we were doing, and you
I-
voted against
I
it.
couldn't hear what David said at all.
Okay.
He talked
So-
so quiet.
You okay?
We're on what was item 5 has now become item 2. Discussion direction regarding operating agreement with Go Augusta for the Augusta, Kansas Welcome Center and the Frisco Depot. And staff, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, Mayor and Council, we have, in order to operate our facility at the Frisco Depot, which functions as the welcome center for the community, has meeting room spaces, has offices for Go, so the home for our convention and tourism committee. Several years ago, we actually entered into an operating agreement, just something that brought clarity to the relationship, that helped outline roles and responsibilities of the various parties. Originally, that agreement was with the Chamber of Commerce, and then later the Chamber merged with DAI, and then ended up with the Go Augusta organization. So the last time that we looked at this agreement was about 3 years ago, and you had a term on it, and that term is coming to its end. And so I wanted to bring this back, and it's a discussion direction item tonight. So I don't have a full draft of an agreement with any specific changes. What you have is a draft with questions and comments that was provided by the Go Augusta Executive Director. And the agreement was structured in such a way where basically it said that either party can end it if you provide notice. Otherwise, the agreement can kind of continue in its form and be renewed for an additional 3 years. So I wanted to bring this back to council and ask, as staff goes back into updating the draft, do you have anything specific that you would like to see in the relationship? It's a chance to introduce the new executive director and get a feel for Go Augusta's vision and what they're working on. And you can also hear directly before staff starts touching anything in the agreement what some of the questions or thoughts were. So it's simply a discussion direction tonight. You don't have to approve an agreement tonight, but I wanted to get your take on any changes, if there were any, before staff started negotiating anything or changing it. And if you don't have any preferences for changes, then we can simply bring back a draft that addresses the technical changes with no real substantive change for approval at the next meeting. So with that, if council is okay with this, I'd like to invite Shauna up and just give her a chance to do a quick introduction of herself and
Yes.
talk about Go Augusta quickly, and then we can just we can ask some questions and talk through this agreement, see if you have any thoughts or things that you're interested in seeing changed.
Hello, everyone. I am Shauna Dwyer. I officially took on the role of executive director. This is my 3rd week, so 3 weeks ago. And since starting, it's been a lot of execution of 2024 plans that were already set forth in motion. And I'm looking forward to continuing the work that our team had already started on and then building out a plan for 2025 and beyond. As Josh indicated, I'm here just to support the continuance of the operating agreement with the city and see if there's any questions that y'all have of me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yes, welcome.
Appreciate it.
Council, questions?
What kind of vision do you have for Go Augusta?
Go Augusta to me is, we have it on our logo, right? We're 3 different divisions, 3 different departments operating under one umbrella term. Go Augusta is the chamber. It is also the Main Street community and representation of our Red Brick District, and also Convention and Tourism Bureau. And that's a lot under one umbrella for an executive director.
Shauna,
Oh, yes.
move the microphone over or, thank you.
Sure. Thank you. So my vision is really to first get out in the community and get to know everyone, all of our businesses and the members of this beautiful community, and see how we can continue to improve. What should we continue doing? What's going well? And what can we improve on going forward? I would like to increase the chamber memberships and really provide value out into the community, and then see how we can bring new businesses and new voices into the community, make sure that we're representing all of our voices of the community, right? And continue to grow in the community's connection with what we're doing with revitalization efforts downtown, with growing businesses and providing an exciting place to be.
Thank you.
Do you have any plans on bringing the ordinary citizen into the mix and getting their feedback?
Yeah.
Or just you're more chamber and
No, it's the broad community. We actually have Main Street representatives coming in 2 weeks, And we will be setting up focus groups. I actually have 4 focus groups planned, invitations going out in the next couple of days. But one of those is to bring in the community at large to talk to us about what areas they see we could improve on, where they think we're doing good as a community, as an organization, as a chamber, and as well as Main Street. And then talk about like, how can we get additional tourism and maybe even conventions into town, and what does that look like?
And the survey, have you had some responses to the survey? How's that looking?
Absolutely. We, Main Street put together a survey for us, and we started distributing that 2 weeks ago. It was the very first thing that I did when I took my new role. And that community survey is actually out. It's been published on our website, Facebook. We've got some advertisements for it in the park. And as of last Friday, we had 191 responses. So we're pushing it this week. It does close on Friday. If you haven't taken the survey, please take 5-10 minutes to do so. We're really hoping to get over 200 responses by Friday.
Good.
Thank you and
Yeah.
welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you. My
Looking forward to
pleasure.
great things from you.
I'm glad to be here. Anything else?
Josh and Shauna, I suppose. I saw the bullet points with the proposed edits on the document. So do you need any input or guidance from council to?
Yeah, so what I would say about what's bullet pointed on the document, it's not really substantive.
Right.
It's a couple of minor changes on some of the events, updating names, other contacts like that. And I think just some questions that Shauna was asking about, how do we flesh the relationship out further? But it may not even be within the context of the agreement. It's
Sure.
just,
Organic.
where do we get our goals from? What sort of reporting do you want to see back to the council? That sort of thing. So I didn't see anything substantive that merited a lot of change. Even on the financial component, what I would say is it's strictly an update to the number that you're actually paying. Because if you remember, you took a step in this most recent year's budget to add additional funding to support Go Augusta's effort. And so there's a number in the agreement that says 16,005. It's actually 20,000 higher than that from a step that you put directly into the budget. And we just didn't have an amendment that recognized it in the document. So even that is not a substantive change different from something you're already doing. It's just recognizing something you're already doing. So again, unless you have something specific, I don't have any concerns or issues with the relationship as it's been outlined. I would make a few of those technical and wording adjustments and then just bring it back for cleanup and have you all vote on it at the upcoming meeting.
Awesome.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I think that's
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sean.
Appreciate
Appreciate you,
you.
Shauna.
Good to
Thank you.
meet you. Okay. Now let's go to our zoning district reclassification of 204 East Fifth Avenue from an R3 multifamily residential to a C2 local commercial district. Staff?
Good evening. So before you is a reclassification of a property located on Fifth Avenue. This property does have some background and history to it, so I'll just summarize that quickly. There's also some original documentation from 2021 included in your packet for additional information. On March 22nd, 2021, the Augusta Planning Commission approved a rezoning of this property from C3 general commercial to R3 multifamily residential. The change allowed for the creation of eight market rate apartments, and the city council ultimately approved that rezoning on April 5th of 2021. After the rezoning was approved and the property was designated for residential use, the intended development of the 8 market rate apartments didn't proceed as planned. Instead, the property is now being utilized as rental space for a plumbing contractor. So this case was brought before the Planning Commission again to be rezoned back to commercial. However, this time staff felt that C2 would be sufficient rather than C3. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on September 9th, 2024. No comments were received from any of the adjacent property owners or from the general public. A presentation was made by staff to the Planning Commission and provided information in support of the request. The Planning Commission considered staff's recommendation and the golden factors. So I will go through and summarize the golden factors real quick, just so they can be in the record for this meeting. So when the Planning Commission and the City Council are considering a rezoning, you must consider these 9 factors in your decision. The first one is character of the immediate neighborhood. The property for this rezone is surrounded by properties in the general commercial, downtown commercial, and multifamily residential zoning districts. Number 2, compatibility of the proposed district classification with nearby properties. Current uses around this property include a funeral home, a post office, other offices, and single and multifamily residences. Number 3, suitability of the uses to which the property has been restricted under its existing zoning. The subject property can be considered suitable in the area. Number 4, extent to which the zoning amendment may detrimentally affect nearby property. Staff does not anticipate any detrimental effect to nearby property. Number 5, length of time the subject property has remained vacant as zoned. The property is currently not vacant. The plumbing business has already moved into the building. However, prior to this, the property was vacant since 2021 when it was rezoned to R3. Number 6, the proportionality of losses impact to individual owners in the immediate vicinity relative to the net gain for the community at large. No hardship on other individual landowners is expected. Number 7, adequacy of public utilities, roadways, and other needed public services relative to the anticipated impacts of the proposed use. Current utilities exist and support the intended use. Number 8, consistency with the comprehensive plan, visions, and character of the City of Augusta. In the comprehensive plan, the future land use map designates the subject property as mixed-use local commercial zoning. And that's where the star is. And number 9, public input or sentiment regarding the proposed use as voiced in the public hearing or other communication. Staff posted the public hearing on the city website and sent out letters to adjacent property owners, and there has not been any public response that has been received. So with that, I can stand for any questions, or I would recommend approval of zoning case RZ 2024-08, a zoning district reclassification from R3 multifamily residential to C2 local commercial district for property located at 204 East 5th Avenue. Adopt ordinance number 2240 and authorize the mayor to sign.
And Mayor and Council, as ordinance, that is a roll call motion vote.
Basically, we're just moving it back to zone for what it's always been used as.
Correct.
Can you go over the tax implications of that? Like what it was before, what it is now, or what it will go back to, like from a city standpoint, or I understood there was maybe going to be some tax changes from what it was to what it will become on a different level or something of that nature.
I don't.
Well, I mean, the county sets those.
I'm
Tax
sorry.
bracket, the county sets those,
Right.
and it's based off of the land use, not necessarily the zoning. So even if this was zoned residential, if it was being used for commercial, the appraisal would have it listed as commercial and it get charged as commercial with their property tax already.
So as a general statement, residential is taxed at a lower rate, but to what Cammie was saying, we don't know if the appraiser necessarily had changed anything yet from the previous zoning actions.
And this was initiated by the applicant and the property owner, not the city.
Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to rezone the property located at 204 East Fifth Avenue from R3 to C2 and adopt ordinance number 2240 and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Erica, do you want to call the roll?
Martin,
Yes.
Burke,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Marr.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So let's move down to what was item 3, which is now item 4. One-step preliminary and final plat tower subdivision, a replat of Lot 6 to Walkeny Hills Estates. Staff?
Mayor and council, before you is a one-step preliminary and final plat for a lot slash new subdivision that's out in the planning area. It's over by the Rural Water 5 water tower. This tract of land is 6.5 acres. It's currently raw, vacant, and as I stated, located within the planning area. The lot was originally platted 6 of Walkeny Hills Estate. That was previously split and acquired by of a water tower. And at that time, they did a lot split and boundary adjustment, and they did not do a replat. Now the owner wishes to further split the lot into 2 separate rural residential lots, which requires a replat. The proposal splits 6.5 acres into Lot 1, which will be 1.155 acres, and Lot 2, which will be 5 acres. The zoning and land use will be rural residential. Since this is located in the planning area, the preliminary and plat and corresponding drainage plan were approved by the Augusta Planning Commission on September 9th of 2024. And then we also sent it to Butler County Planning Commission for approval, and that was approved September 16th of 2024. I will stand for any questions on this plat. Like I stated, it's in the planning area. The city doesn't provide any utilities. We're not even in the space to be in a viable option to provide utilities. So if there's not any questions, I would recommend approval of zoning case FP 2024-09, a one-step preliminary and final plat of Tower Subdivision, a replat of Lot 6 to Walkeny Hills Estates.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve zoning case FP 2024-09, a one-step preliminary and final plat of tower subdivision, replat of Lot 6 to Walkeny Hills Estates.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Let's move down to the item submission of recommendation to taxing entities about reinstatement into the neighborhood revitalization program. Staff?
Yes, Mayor and Council, at a prior meeting, you had an individual whose property was in the neighborhood revitalization program approach you about reinstating their property into the program for a second time. So they had previously been bumped from the program and had been reinstated and have now asked for it a second time. As we discussed at that meeting, there is, I'm not even going to call it discrepancy. You just have changes that occurred to your plan between plan versions, but you happen to have an element going on where homes are in these programs for far beyond the planned term in which they originated, okay? And so the basic question that arose was regarding the reinstatement provision, which had actually changed from one of the NRP plans to the next. How do you interpret it and how should you handle that situation? So in an older version of the plan, it basically said everybody gets one reinstatement. That's it. So easy, there's not a whole lot of review. If you miss and you correct it, you get back in. The newest version of the plan changed that provision and basically said that it would be handled on a case-by-case review of the city council, Okay, so the situation is that the person's home entered the NRP under an earlier version of the plan. Now they're having a reinstatement, but that old version of the plan has expired. And the way that that's always been interpreted historically, and this is the position when the appraiser looks at it and enforces it as our administrator or whoever's actually enforcing it, I assume it's the appraiser, but I'm not sure. But at the county level, that's one of the things we pay them for is the administration of this program. It's always been interpreted as the provisions of the plan that were in place when the property entered the program is what we use. And so staff sent a letter back to the property owner notifying them that you already had your one reinstatement and the plan basically does not conceive of us doing a second one. And they asked to approach the city council, which anybody from the public has a right to do. And that's what started the process. You heard from that individual, and what you had asked staff to do after that presentation was to reach out to the other taxing entities and try to understand if we were to make that interpretation, reinstate them, how would they view it? Because what NRP is it is an interlocal agreement that is signed on by all of the taxing entities to participate in the plan as it's drafted. Okay, so the question or the concern was making sure that your other participating partners were in agreement with the plan of action. I was only able to reach out to 2 of them. I did not get to speak to the community college, but I spoke to Butler County, spoke to the school district, and I thought that Will Johnson's probably made the most sense to me. His answer from the county was the NRP is a city program. He felt like it was most appropriate for the city council to make an interpretation and take a position and then submit those recommendations to the other entities to determine how they would handle it, as opposed to them making a decision before the city council has or saying how they would decide. And that seemed fair to me. It is your program. So I spoke with Matt Ward about it, and he said something similar. So what I did after that is I had the city attorney do a review of the plan documents and just ask about interpretation. One, because you do have an element of attorney general approval. Whenever you do an interlocal agreement like this, that has to be submitted to the attorney general to sign off on. So I had questions about that. But also just looking at the plans generally and do you have an interpretation that allows you to take any particular action? So, Andrew, do you want me to do the highlight of what you presented? Or do you want to go ahead and just let them know? I'll pull it up on the screen if you want to. So Andrew had looked at it, and I've attached the full answer so that you could actually read it. And I think basically what this interpretation allows is, and that's assuming that you accept that interpretation, because I think in my discussion with you that there is gray area, there is room for interpretation. So this interpretation allows you to take a specific action. It references the language in this paragraph that says the agreement shall expire. So that's referring to the old agreement, and that the parties agree to undertake a new NRP with any needed modifications, and that they're agreeing to participate in this new NRP with those modifications as they've been agreed to. So essentially, the newest version of your plan does have a modification that allows a case-by-case review. So if you find that interpretation acceptable, then that gives you a basis for making the decision. What I would say, and this is from the staff perspective, is it is different than how we've handled the other folks that have been disqualified and or reinstated. And so it sets kind of a precedent going forward, but also raises a question of folks that have already had reinstatement actions or been disqualified from the program. So I asked Cammie about getting some numbers on how many cases were potentially affected. I think that we've had two, or if I remember the numbers correctly, I think 2 or 3 properties had been fully disqualified and are not in the program. But when they were contacted, they also didn't challenge it back in the day. So everybody gets that letter notifying them when they've had a delinquency and they've been kicked, and it outlines the process for how you go about challenging that. I believe those 2 or 3 that have been fully disqualified did not carry that action through. But we do have 7 properties that were initially bumped and have been reinstated. And then you have, this may be one of only 2 examples. I think maybe this is a case in and of itself where you have a property owner in this new plan that is in their second reinstatement ask. So there is some novelty to it, but those other 7 properties that previously were reinstated, that could come up again for their second reinstatement. So making a determination here has precedent for all of these. And so unfortunately, I don't have a perfect answer for you on what you should do. Because the agreement seem to allow, based on interpretation, different courses of action with different implications. All I can tell you is allowing the reinstatement is different than what we've done in the other examples. And but you do have a pathway for considering that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add is that, in the old expired NRP, there was discretion to give a reprieve for a delinquency one time. In the new NRP program that you all adopted, you did away with that provision and you specifically modified that provision so that it simply gives you the discretion, you guys the discretion, whether or not to grant a reprieve. You don't have to grant a reprieve on a tax delinquency to put them back in the program ever. But I think one reason it changed is because it seemed like there were instances where the one-time restriction wasn't consistent with maybe what some people thought was just. So.
Josh, question A, I guess the first question is, are we time for questions? Are we ready for questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. That was an easy one. That was your softball pitch. Yeah. So with the NRP that we've currently adopted, is there amendments that we can do as the council to amend this agreement and submit it to the other interlocal bodies for approval and then subsequently the state? Or do we need to simply save those revisions for the next time that this NRP plan expires and a new one may be considered?
So the attorney may have something he wants to say on that, so I'll let him do that. My answer is probably yes to both.
Okay.
I think that if you do want to bring clarity specific, so just anybody at home that's following, the issue is you have an NRP plan that lasts for 3 years. You have properties that are in it for 10.
Right.
So there's a 7-year gap under which they can be reinstated. Okay, so the question is what provision is going to govern that 7 years?
Mm-hmm.
So any new version you do of a plan, it would probably be helpful to make that reinstatement provision very explicit, how you would want it handled. That would bring clarity, okay? So yes, to the second part, you should do that in any new version.
Mm-hmm.
To the existing, you probably have the ability to do amendments. That's my thought, but it would have to go back through that same process where all of the entities are signing on and the attorney general and all of those things. So does it bring an immediate resolution or relief in this particular case? No, it'll probably take months to complete that because that's how long it took the first time through. So I don't know if you had a thought on whether this is absolutely final or could not be amended. I imagine it could be. We've never done it during an actual program term, but I assume it can be.
Yeah, it could be amended, but you'd have to go through the whole process. I think I just wanted to add that my opinion here is limited to the specific question addressed, and it might be different if other issues were put to me,
Right.
because other areas of law may come in on other questions.
Sure. And the reason I ask those questions is clearly I'm mindful of precedent, right? I think we want to make sure that what we do for one, we're able to do for all. I think that's important. And I do also understand mitigating circumstances, which is why I think the prior plan was amended to the current plan, right? And so clearly there's still room to tighten that up and be better. And I think a look back period or a contest period, whatever time frame you may want to put to that, to where somebody has a chance to raise their hand within an X amount of months or days, whatever that may look like. I think we could frame that up. I just know we don't have it based on where we sit tonight. So that process that may take months, I'm not necessarily opposed to that if it helps make it right so that we can have a consistent approach to anybody that finds themselves in these requests. I'm just talking amongst you all at this point.
I agree with you, Jake.
So I was thinking about this quite a bit and things. I guess personally, I would really like to see us stick with what we've done in the past with go the one time. I feel like we are setting new precedents here if we do that, and could allow the other people that we have taken out of the NRP program, allow them to come back in here with a legitimate argument for that fact.
Retroactive.
And I really feel like, no matter what the circumstances here, I mean, I know there's always other circumstances and things that come into play, but whether the bill got lost in the mail or the dog ate it or whatever, I feel like, we are consistent with our other people that live in the community with paying their taxes and things. And I think this is kind of a little bit, to me, it's a little bit slap in the face to them and things. And we gave them a great opportunity here to participate into it. And it's one of those things, if I'm going to be a part of that, by gosh, I better keep track of what's going on in there and stuff if I want to be a part of it and things, and participate that and take in that privilege that they've given to me, the city's given to me. So that's just my personal opinion. I'd like to see us stay with what you had and not approve this.
Kip, I understand your perspective, but what if it's a clerical error? That's not their fault, like it was in my personal case. I wouldn't had a chance, and it wasn't because I wasn't willing to pay. It wasn't because I didn't want to pay. It's because it was a clerical error on the county and not getting it to me. And so that's why I have a hard time with that. And I do think we need to be consistent. And if it is, and you said the word legitimate, and it is a legitimate claim that they come back to us with, and it's legitimate, we need to be fair to them. So that's kind of where I stand on that. But I do see your point as well.
Anybody else want to voice an opinion?
Josh, is this something that if it's approved tonight, could be retroactive for others that were denied?
I think we're making an opinion to give to the other parties.
Okay. So the start of my answer is I think what it does is it starts a process, and I can't tell you where the process finishes because it is a different even if we say this is the way it should have always been handled and we're just not doing it the way we intended. I think that because it is different than every other example, that we would still need to submit the recommendations to the other taxing entities and see where they fall on that. If you do go the route of making language changes, one of the interesting components about working with other partners is the partners don't have to agree with you. And you could have a situation where they say that, no, we don't like that change. We're not going to participate if you want to do that. in which case the rebate program could become just the city's portion of property taxes and not the other entities. That's a possibility. I don't know what they'll say, but that's a possibility. Or they could just pass it right through and be totally fine with it. But if you go back, that's the element that you're introducing, is what will the partners agree to? And I don't have an answer to that. So I do see you starting a process. One of my thoughts on it, and I'd have to flesh this out with the attorney, is if the previous property owners, and I'm kind of brainstorming out loud, so let me know if you follow this argument or would agree with it. But if the previous property owners that were actually fully disqualified did not execute their right under this paragraph to make notification to the city to challenge it, then I don't know that you give them another chance to make a challenge. To me, it seems more fair that if someone had gone through a process and did actually challenge it, and you made a different determination at the time that now you would make differently, then maybe that's a basis that makes more sense for revisiting their situation. I don't know that you have a lot of those because, like I said, those 7 that we're aware of that were previously disqualified have been reinstated, and then you have the 2 or 3 that were fully booted from the program, but based on our records, it doesn't indicate that they challenged it either. So that's just one of the things I would throw out in terms of the precedent that you set and how you should handle it going forward. Now, attorney, I don't know what you think about that option.
To me, I
Well,
would.
let me say that I do know of one party that we fully booted on the first go round because they missed. They came to me and one other council person and wanted to know what their chances were of getting reinstated. And we said, you had your chance. You blew it. So they didn't follow through because we just told them what we thought was going to happen at the council level.
Do you know what year that was, which program that was in?
Well, it might have been 5 or 6 years ago.
So, I mean, it could have been 2 plans ago.
Yeah,
And
it could have been.
That's the challenge in that example.
But I think that's where, so I don't disagree with the mayor's example there, because as I sit here and listen to your example of maybe they were in the old plan, they got booted, they didn't raise their hand to say, I'd like back in or I'd like another chance. I don't necessarily discount them as not necessarily wanting back in or being frustrated or opting not to challenge that simply because they didn't. I think that's just their personality types that are going to say, that's the rule, that stinks. And if I had the opportunity to challenge it, I would. And so I think that I don't think we can automatically preclude those situations, but I would ask us not to if we were exploring that.
So a new challenge then is you go back 6 or 7 years.
That's
and
my
now,
point.
And now have to start rebating taxes and making payments back across all of these entities. That's going to get complicated.
And that's why I'm looking at if there were an amendment to be considered, is that amendment a look back period that says it can't go back more than X number of months or whatever that may look like. But I think you'd have to define that for the very example you just shared.
I kind of tend to agree with Kip. If we start down that road, it could get messy. And there's people that are going to be upset that they didn't get the chance. As much as I feel for that lady, I don't think we can actually go ahead and reinstate her.
And I don't disagree. There's an element that I agree with in that space as well. But I think it's important for her and our community at large to hear this discussion so they know that there's not it's not an easy decision because you're trying to look at all the factors and the fact that you've got people involved, right? So it's not an easy decision in that regard. You could say it's an easy decision and what's the black and white say? That's still, you got people involved. So you're trying to figure out, can I help? Right. So I think it's important for the community to know that we're looking for a way to help. So.
Anybody else want to talk about it? We'll need a motion one way or the other.
Well, I'll make one just to start it off. I'll make a motion to not approve the resubmission back into the neighborhood revitalization program for the property at 1216 North State Street.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Believe them. Okay, we need a show of hands. All those in favor of the motion? Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. It's good to have these discussions. I'm sorry that it doesn't always go the way that people want it, but
Yeah, Mayor and Council, the NRP itself, I believe, expires in 2027, so you're still under this one for another couple of years. But again, keep this conversation in mind, because I would make the recommendation that if you do want to bring further clarity to that reinstatement or would want to change in the future, we need some different language than what we had to really clarify that interpretation.
I would charge Mr. Marr to work on that. He has the more experience in that area than I do.
If I could add on to that, I have some other examples of municipalities. So if you want to review some other ones and see what they have as their provision, I'd be happy to provide what I have.
Sounds good to me.
Awesome, yes. I think we don't have to recreate the wheels better.
Right.
Sure.
Huh?
Okay. I believe we're on, what was item 6 is now item 7, bid awards for Water Division Storage Building. Staff?
Mayor and Council, I'm going to give you just a quick reminder of some history and let our Public Utilities Director cover those specifics on this project. But discussion regarding the Public Works Complex has actually gone back probably 15 plus years. There were various drawings and things initiated with City Manager Bill Kiefer, and then it's carried on since then in a variety of different formats. And then the last action that we had before we got to this point was a conversation with council about acquiring some other property in town, existing buildings in town, and seeing if we could use that. And we do have some new members on the council that were not here when that happened, but you guys actually did go and did site visits of existing buildings and made a determination at that time that it wasn't the right move for us long term and wouldn't meet all of our needs, and your preference would be for us to work on building and designing actual facilities that met our long-term needs. So that was some history that some of you may not remember and weren't here for. I do gloss over it and reference it in the staff report, but that was some of the background for how we got into these discussions about doing new buildings. Okay, now with that, for this particular building and the background, I want to turn it over to Public Utilities Director Tim Johnson. Let him walk you through the process on this water building.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Tim Johnson, Public Utilities Director. What you have before you this evening is a report asking you to consider approval of 2 low bids to construct a new storage building for the Water Division that would replace an old, insecure, dilapidated structure currently located on East 5th Street. The first bid is for the construction site itself. That would be the drainage, the dirt work, the pad, and the earth underneath the concrete pad. That bid, the low bid for that portion of the project was submitted by Kane Construction Services for the amount of $162,651. I would add, however, that that final cost could increase if we run into issues with soil conditions or subgrade integrity. If that happens, we would bring a change order to you for consideration. That change order might cover things such as removing and replacing unsuitable soil, installing geotech fabric between the slab and the soil, or adding crushed aggregate for stabilization. We won't really know the extent and the nature of any of these needs until we actually begin moving the dirt and doing the grading. The second bid is for construction of the building itself. That low bid was submitted by Barclay Construction in the amount of $299,022. They also recommended an additional $10,900 for an 8-foot high plywood inner wall liner, which staff believe would be money well spent, as it would protect both the insulation and the tin siding of the building from damage over the years. And it also provides a structure upon which to either add storage shelves or to attach storage bins to make them more stable. So the total recommended cost for the building with that $10,900 add is $305,922. The combined total for both of these contracts, excluding any change orders, would be $468,573. Now, for a little background, in addition to what Josh just shared with you. Back in 2016, the city included funding for new public works facilities in a bond issue as part of the Pride and Progress sales tax initiative. Unfortunately, the funding was only sufficient to complete one new building, and that building was the solid waste building that's located on the Power Plant number 2 campus. That building was prioritized because the old structure was the most dilapidated of all the city's working facilities. A few years later, the city did build that project on East 12th Street. And once that was completed in late 2020, began making plans for the next step. It was at this time that the city engaged in discussions for the potential purpose of the old Linex building over at 411 Osage. After visiting the site and discussing with city staff the pros and cons of that building, the governing body at that time determined it would not meet the city's long-term public works needs, and that we should prioritize building our own build-to-suit facilities at a later date. Once the solid waste building was completed, staff began developing plans for the future public works and water division improvements around this area of 5th and Grove. And I believe we have an aerial in the report that illustrates not just the area, but the layout for all of the buildings in that area. That facility would house the streets division, parks division, a relocated solid waste division, and replace the existing structure used by the water division. Planning for the campus itself actually began in 2023 when the city's former engineer, Schwab Eaton, platted the area and conducted a drainage study. These were completed by the end of last year. City staff next consulted with Sourcewell, the contractor behind the 2020 solid waste building, to develop construction cost estimates for all of these facilities. Sourcewell is a government cooperative purchasing agency that helps public entities
such as schools and cities and nonprofits, speed up their procurement process, often through pre-negotiated contracts with vendors. This ranges from everything from office supplies and technology to vehicles, which we often have used in the past, and even buildings such as the current solid waste building. For sequencing purposes, the water division is the first structure we need to build because we're going to need that space for the new solid waste facility. Initially, Sourcewell's estimate for the water division building was much higher than expected, so staff saw alternatives and determined that the traditional bidding process, design, bid, build, would achieve lower costs. Throughout spring and summer of this year, while we prepared bid specs, the new city engineer, JEO, worked on design and cost estimates for the site development. Bid docs were completed and published in August of this year, and bids were open in September. Again, the combined bid doc amount is $468,573. This represents, surprisingly, a reduction from the Sourcewell estimate of $974,000, more than 50%. Sourcewell is something we look to save us time and to some extent money, yet in this particular instance, it would have been twice the cost of the traditional design, bid, build process. These two beds are also well beneath the engineer's estimate of $696,223. The report includes a bid analysis table for each of these two bids. Funding will come from the Water Treatment Fund, and I would leave it to Josh to provide you any details on that. And I will stop there and happily respond to any questions you may have.
So regarding the financing, you're going to have to remember back, or I can show it to you later. But in the 2025 budget, we have a revised estimate that we had provided in the 2025 budget of about $450,000 in this line item. You can see what the total came in at, so it's higher than what that revised number was. And when you factor in the original engineering, it takes that total line item up to about $509,000. So you have enough money in the water fund to cover that addition. We expected it to be higher than our original numbers that we had plugged in, but it ended up, with all things including all of the engineering, to be a little bit higher than that. So I just wanted to draw that to your attention. Now I'll stand for any questions as well.
What all kind of storage is going to be in this building?
Everything that rolls and then some will go in this building. This building is desperately needed because we have to park so many of our vehicles and equipment outside. And you may recall, we've had more than one instance in which we've had vandalism and theft occur to those vehicles and that equipment. This will allow us to not just secure them, but also to store them out of the weather so that we get a better and longer performance out of them.
And even with the security fencing that we had installed, it wasn't enough to stop the theft. So the building's an additional barrier in between that to try to discourage it.
So on the walls that are going to have the plywood on those, if you look at that, what else is going to be there for protection? Because what I'm looking at is with that plywood on there, 8 foot up, that's highly combustible material in a building where we got vehicles, where we got storage, things like that, that we're adding this fire growth possibility in that if something happens.
I cannot speak to that. It's typical to do like this. And what I can speak to is however it is done, any way that it is done will have to be done to current building code. And then our code official is deeply involved in seeing to that everything whether it's our structure or any other structure, is built to code. But is it chipboard? Is it plywood? That I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
Like I said, I think we need to make sure that we spend the time to look at that, for the combustibility part of that. Because if something happens, that takes out our whole building at one time.
Mhm.
Thing. So I just would think we need to make sure and pay good attention to that.
Sam, is that built into I'm assuming that's built into the design, fire suppression and all of that is built into the design?
No fire suppression. This is a cold storage building. But we don't have
I
fire
would just
suppression in
say-
the existing building either.
In the construction industry, the plywood on the walls is a typical thing you'll see in a maintenance storage facility for vehicles, so. Never heard about the combustibility issue.
And I think, on the fire suppression side, I think a lot of times in your fire codes, that's triggered by the square footage of your buildings. And the last one that I was aware of, I think 10,000 square foot is kind of a threshold. I believe this building is 5,000 or less. And so I don't think it triggers the legal requirement for fire suppression in it that exists in fire code. But certainly we will look into those things and make sure we're doing it the right way.
And if I'm reading this right, it looks like the groundwork would commence in November and then building commence after New Year.
That is their commitment in writing.
Yeah.
We gave an April 1st, I believe, move-in date so as to afford as much flexibility to all potential contractors as possible. While it's a nice project, it's not a large project. And we wanted contractors to have the ability to plug it in to slow business spots on their schedules so that we would get better quotes.
Yeah.
Any other questions, council?
One question, sorry, Mr. Mayor. With the dirt work that they'll do, will that be in foresight of the groundwork that's coming with the other public works vision?
Excellent question. Yes. This is at the high end of the larger, if you would take us to the rendering in the report. This is at the north end of the consolidated campus vision. And we've had a drainage study done for everything in the color area there. And the north end is the high ground. So yes, we've asked JEO to begin doing a drainage study for the entire area, but to begin at the high end, because this building we're discussing this evening is the first building. So we want to be sure that we do nothing at the north end that's going to have harmful or negative or costly impact on how everything else to the south is developed.
Right, good.
Is that considered a floodplain area down there, Josh?
No, so.
I know it's behind the dike, but.
Yeah, so trying to remember the flood map. This building, I don't believe, shows up in any of those. Once you get down in those being the flood maps, once you get down here in this section, I believe it falls into an area where you are required to elevate the buildings like 1 or 2 feet to bring it up. So that would be your base flood elevation on those buildings. But this particular building up here, I do not believe falls into that at all.
I was reading about FEMA today, and what I was reading looked like they're going to do away with 100-year floodplain plans and go to 500-year plans, and that entails different areas, doesn't it? When you do that,
It very well could, yeah.
So we'll need 2 separate motions if we desire to go forward with this.
One last question, Tim. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I apologize. We're going to be replacing, is this going to be those Quonset huts that are about to blow over, are we gonna be tearing those down? Or we're keeping this, but all on this plan, right? We're not-
Eventually, everything that's out there will go away and be replaced, but nothing will be.
As a result of this, nothing, those are still stand.
Nothing's going to be torn down to build this building.
Gotcha.
The
Yeah, I
next
understand.
building that may come down may be that red building on Fifth Street that they currently use as a storage building. It depends on how the construction of the rest of the project is sequenced. The one thing we do know is we can't build that next building there because this red building is already there. So it will have to go before a solid waste building gets constructed. But no other buildings will be removed at this point in time. And it may be that temporarily for the next year or two, this building is used by street or sanitation for some overflow storage so that they can get some material or equipment out of the rain.
Just for some history's sake, that red building was moved, disassembled, and then reassembled there, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So it was a used building when we got it.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve Kane Construction Services bid in the amount of $162,651 for the building site and pad.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve Kane's bid. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve Barkley Construction bid in the amount of $295,022 plus a recommended addition of $10,900 for an 8-foot high inner plywood wall liner.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, thank you, Tim.
You want to hang out for a second, Tim?
Yeah, he's probably gonna need to hang out. So item number 8, which was number 7, acceptance of the quote to repair the Mulvane water line.
I didn't write that report. I didn't know what I said.
Staff,
Yes, Mayor and Council, I am bringing this to you. This is a recommendation from a conversation I had with the city attorney, just to make sure I'm handling this the right way. So back in kind of the middle of September, there was a boil discovered in the river at the railroad bridge crossing kind of south and west of the wastewater treatment plant. When you see that boil, that normally means that there's a leak in the line, and it happens to be under the river where the water is at. That's why you see the water boiling in that way. And typically, BNSF is the way that we discover these things, because we don't have maintenance roads and things that go all along that line, but their railroad tracks do, and their maintenance workers do. So they're the ones that typically find stuff like this. So it turns out that we had a leak on the Mulvane line underneath of the Whitewater River. And shortly after it was discovered, our water team contacted the city of Mulvane, give them a period of time to get their wells up and running, get their plant operational so they can make sure to service their needs, and then had to shut the line down. And then they started working with the local contractors that we have typically contacted, because this is a very specific type of work, and boring work is very specific. So we've had a couple of contractors that have done projects like this for us over the years with Nowak and Donlinger. And Donlinger did not end up providing a bid to us. And then about a week after we contacted them, Nowak did get back to us with a bid. This line is the source of water for Mulvane under typical conditions, and they generally only use their wells as backup. supply, so it is problematic for them to operate with those for an extended period of time. But what NOAC had indicated is that there's probably a 6 to 8 week time period in order to get this initiated. And so we considered this an emergency action to get that line operational again. Mulvane is a wholesale customer of ours, and pursuant to our agreement with the city of Mulvane, which I believe I thought I provided an expert. Maybe I just referenced it in the staff report. But the wording in that agreement basically says that the city of Augusta is fully responsible for the maintenance on that line. So there's not a lot of room for interpretation of that language. So we considered it an emergency repair, and I talked to the city attorney about it, and we decided to go ahead and authorize them because there was that extended lead time. We didn't want to create a delay because it fell in this 2 or 3 week lull period in between council meetings with you guys. But what the city attorney suggested is that I bring it to you now so that you could ratify the action that I've taken to go ahead and initiate NOAC on the project. Their proposal for the repair was $213,190. Obviously, that's not a hit that we expect to take every year. That's not going to be fun to cover, and will potentially, or has the potential to, create some cash flow issues with us. So we brainstormed a little bit about how to navigate that problem. I don't have a full answer back from the city of Mulvane, but we're proposing to try to split it in half and cover it over a 2-year period, just to give us a little bit of room to absorb that easier. And we have asked the city of Mulvane if they could potentially cover up to about $100,000. That would kind of be like a prepayment on their next year's water usage. So they would get a credit on next year's bill. And then we would take the $113,000 hit that we would have to absorb this year. So that just spreads it out over a little bit longer period of time for us to try to make the cash flow component of it work. So that's a plan we came up with. Again, I don't think that their council has voted on it yet, but I did speak with their administrator, and he thought that might be workable, but I do need to follow up with them and make sure that they're still good with that. So that's the background. Here's the aerial map. This is the wastewater plant south of town on Highway 77, and you can see the leak is actually under the river down by the old iron railroad bridge. So it's in an inconvenient location. We're going to have to, or the contractor is going to have to clear out some woods and other sort of things to get down to it. There's going to be a bit of a mess left when it's done. We did talk with JEO, who did some outreach with KDHE, and they're not expecting, since it's an emergency repair, that there's going to be a lot of additional permitting or things that go along with it. There may be something like a permit after the fact that they issue to us. So nothing to slow it down. They viewed it as an emergency repair as well. So that's the background on the project. I know our water superintendent worked with the vendors to try to get those estimates. I don't know if Tim has anything else to add, but we'll both stand for any questions that you may have on this particular item.
Anybody, questions?
Josh, as far as the pipeline itself, what is the material of that pipeline?
I believe it's steel,
It's
cast
steel
iron,
or
cast
iron.
iron.
Couple things about this. Every year or so, sometimes twice a year, sometimes once every 2 years, we have a leak in this line, and it varies between 12 and 24 inches, depending on what section of the line you're in. It's truly a quilt of a line. It's very old and very decrepit. Were this leak anywhere but under the river, it would already be repaired at a fraction of the cost that we're talking about. This will require boring a new line under the river parallel to the existing line with a sleeve into which we'll put plastic, probably 20-inch pipe. We do not want to throttle the pipe size down at this point for pressure reasons. We never want to come back at this location. This is a river. The bore will be about 400 feet long. It's a gargantuan bore. Again, a steel liner, plastic pipe in it, and then 45 back into the existing line north and south of the river. It just couldn't be a worse location than this. I believe statute requires that we will have to be at least 8 feet under the river bed. It's a nightmare. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Do we find these failures to be at joint connections, or is it just general failure of the pipeline itself?
It's general failure.
Yeah.
It could be a joint or not, but it's generally general failure throughout the line. I don't know the entire history of the line, but I do know that it's so old that it used to be Mulvane's and the water used to run in the opposite direction. And that since the 1990s, I believe it's been ours, and we've been supplying them water.
It was put in like 1952.
So Mayor and Council, I think Mayor Rawlings may be the only one that was on the council and remembers it. I can't remember, Sue, when you were on the council, but we actually had to do this west of town on the Santa Fe Lake line in, I think, 2012.
Yeah.
So we've only got 2 river crossings, and we've had to deal with both of them in the last 10
That one was
years.
a rough one.
In that case, it's a tertiary water source, so it's our second backup option, so you're not under the gun. And we were able to go after FEMA funding and secure other assistance. In this case, as a sole source provider to the city of Mulvane, we just don't have the luxury of addressing it that way. And that's why it's coming to you as this emergency project.
Well,
We do typically in the budget, there is a capital line item that is for capital projects, and it doesn't say City of Mulvane line or the Mulvane transmission line, but that's what that allocation exists for. And it's only $30,000, and that's because we've averaged much less than that. A lot of our repairs have been in the 11,000, 15,000 range, but none of them were under the river. And so that's completely changed our dynamic and our financial situation.
Speaking of Mulvane, has Mulvane moved the needle at all on any conversations about future use?
Not yet.
Okay.
How long have we been, you done?
Sure.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
You're good.
The annual budget of 30,000, how long have we been budgeting that? I mean,
Only the last 3 or 4 years, and it's because we didn't budget anything for it before, and when we had leaks like that, it just ate into the operating budget. So we made sure to start allocating.
so that's where the dollars have gone to the like Santa Fe line, or
No,
that would have been before that, I guess. Yeah.
no, the 30,000 was added because we were running into projects like this on these transmission lines and didn't have anything allocated to address them. And so they just got absorbed. And when we didn't allocate for anything, that led to compromises on operations. And so we started making some kind of allocation that covered those repairs for years. This one just happens to be bigger than what we typically allocate.
Sure. But that fund is sitting at like 19,000 now. Am I reading?
Yeah, we did have a repair already this year of about $11,000. And I can't remember where that one was. Where was that one, Tim? Do you recall? So yeah, we don't even have that full 30 available. We only have about 19 of that 30 left.
Thunder Road, didn't we? The one Thunder Road, was that the one we had?
Well, this one is pretty much on Thunder Road too. We've had a number of them on Thunder Road. We've had them farther south.
Yeah.
Down by Rose Hill.
Yeah. And the reason we got FEMA money for the Whitewater crossing was because that break was caused by a flood situation. And so that allowed us to go after that kind of money. I don't think we've had any high water this year. So, council, would you like to ratify this repair?
I'll make a motion to ratify the city manager's approval of proposal from NOAC Construction, the amount of $213,190 for emergency repair of a water line leak on Mulvane Line under the Whitewater River Bridge.
Second. Got a motion and a second to approve this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
And Mayor and Council, I will continue to work on the financial plan component of that. And when I get clarity from the city of Mulvane, that just make sure this is working the way that we hope, I will make sure to send that out to you to let you know exactly how we're going to cover all of those different costs.
Thanks, Josh, for your work on that.
Yeah, I would think the Water Division, they have done 99% of it.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, under matters from and for council, our city manager has 3 or 4 items he'd like to discuss first with us.
Yes, and Mayor and Council, I didn't put them on the agenda because I've kind of discovered them over the weekend and from different questions that I've got. So mainly social media stuff to start with, just to put some information out there. So there was a project announced on EV chargers for Casey's here that just came out in the news. And so social media chatter started on that. That's not a city grant. Casey's applied for that grant in that project. The city is simply going to be the electric utility, and when they have to make improvements to get their chargers operational, they're going to have costs and things associated with that to do so. But that was not a city grant. So we're not working on that. If anyone's asking about the new chargers, that's a Casey's project.
Do you know those chargers are free or they're charging for that electricity?
It's a Casey's product. I believe they're fast chargers.
Fast
so
chargers.
They're part of that federal program network that they're working on. That they are fast chargers, which is completely different from what we have downtown. These are the really expensive ones.
And could you make it clear who's paying for that electricity for that,
For what?
for those chargers?
Which ones? Casey's?
Yes, Casey's.
Whoever I don't know how they're going to bill it, if they're just going to assume it as Casey's or they'll bill their own customers. I don't know, but it's not the city.
Okay, I just want to make sure that people understood that the city's not paying for those.
The city would
It's been
bill
out there on
Casey's.
social media.
Agreed.
Most of those fast chargers are administered by a third-party pay system for people to create an account and log in and bill to their card. So, but it's not the city paying for it, nor the city taxpayers.
Correct.
Tim Johnson, Public Utilities Director. Mr. Meyer, you are correct. These are level 3 fast chargers. There would have to be some modifications to the city grid to accommodate them, but those modifications will be paid for either by Casey's or through the grant itself. It will not be paid for by the city's ratepayers. These are the kinds of chargers that people actually swipe a credit card to buy the electricity at that point at the charger. The reason we're seeing them is that US 400 is a designated through corridor through the state of Kansas, and it, along with Interstate 35 and Interstate 70 and Interstate 135, are seeing a concentrated amount of federal and state investment in this level 3 fast charging infrastructure going forward. But the city has no skin in this particular project, aside from seeing to it that our grid is able to accommodate the additional load.
Okay, so that was first bullet point item. Second bullet point, just make you aware of something that came up today, and this is regarding public utilities as well, but there has been a massive call out for mutual aid for the Southeast, particularly in Florida, related to the pending hurricane, and we will have a crew from the City of Augusta responding as part of that mutual aid request and heading down to assist with those recovery efforts for a few weeks. So just wanted to get that information out there. There's a contingent from the Kansas Power Pool and other partners heading down, and we're going to be a part of that.
Kansas Municipal Utilities, KMU, coordinates disaster response for Kansas utilities, municipal utilities. And they're coordinating this response. It's a request from the City of Orlando, which has its own public power utility, just like Augusta's, through APPA, the American Public Power Association. KMU has sent out the word, and 8 communities in this state will be sending a total of 24 staff beginning first thing tomorrow morning down to Florida. They will rendezvous in Orlando and be coordinated by Orlando Public Power for a period of time of up to 2 weeks. 2 of your staff and 1 of your bucket trucks will be participating in this.
Appreciate that to the staff that's already on their way for that. Thank you.
And then the last thing, and I just heard about this, I didn't even see it, but apparently there was a picture of city staff installing a stop sign that showed up on social media as well. And I guess the critique was about the number of staff members. I believe there's 5 members in the picture. 3 of them are brand new folks that we are training, and we have to install 160 new signs in town. Those signs have to follow the manual and uniform traffic control devices, MUTCD federal standards for height regulation and all of that. So they are being trained to assist with that installation project going forward. That's why you see them in the picture. That is, 3 of those are our new folks being trained for the project they're getting ready to do. The final thing that I want to speak to, and I'd like to do this at all of the upcoming meetings, just as kind of a wind down, is regarding, put out reminders regarding the upcoming Pride in Progress sales tax vote. So the information that I want to start with for anyone at home tonight is we do have a public portal on the website. If you go to our homepage on AugustaKS.org and just scroll down a little bit to the city news section, you will see this story regarding the Pride in Progress sales tax. So if you click on that and follow the link, it takes you to this portal that provides answers to questions and explains everything about the upcoming sales tax vote on November 5th. In the top left corner, you see this link for a printable flyer. This is the informational flyer that we sent out to every utility customer in their utility bill. Judging from some of the content on social media, I don't know that a lot of people saw that, but there was an informational flyer that went out in everybody's utility bill. If you didn't see it, you can come to the website and download that flyer here. It talks about the background of the sales tax, what it's been used for, why it's being asked for again, what projects were completed with the one that's going to expire. What is the ballot question going to be? How much money will it generate? What changed, if anything? All of those questions are spoken to in that flyer. So I just want to make sure that anyone at home, you can get access to this flyer if you didn't see it in your utility bill just by going to the city website. Now, in terms of the sales tax itself, I think the biggest question is the criticality of it is, why is this important? Now, the sales tax has several different components to it. 50% of it is used for street maintenance and repair. And if you go back to, I think, at least 1991, I don't know if it existed prior to that, but I found records back to at least 1991. A sales tax for street repairs is how this community has paid projects on streets. So that has been the case going back a really long time. The one change that is in this newest version of the sales tax is wording that says streets and sidewalks, because sidewalks were not explicitly called out in the sales tax ballot measure previously. And there's been a lot of questions and concerns about the walkability of our neighborhoods in town, the condition of the sidewalk network. And so council as a way of making sure that we had resources available to start tackling those issues, made that one word change in this ballot measure to allow for the funding to also be used for sidewalks. So 50%, just go ahead and pull the flyer up. 50% is used for streets and, if approved, sidewalks. 20% is for general capital improvements. And if you go back historically, there is a bullet point listing showing you what improvements were done with this sales tax over the last 10 years. And actually, this whole graphic right here is those improvements as well. So 31 miles of street repair in a 54-mile network, 4 new buildings. So those new buildings were the solid waste building that we discussed tonight, the restrooms in Garvin Park at the playground, the upper level, the new concessions facility and restrooms at the baseball fields, and then the restroom facilities at Shryock Park. That was the 4 buildings that were built. The new specialty parks, that was the dog park, the skate park, and the splash pad. So going all the way back to 2016, that was your sales tax. That was the Pride and Progress sales tax. All of those amenities exist because that sales tax made it possible, and that was the 20% component for the capital improvements. 2 new playgrounds, that's the downtown Dalton Palmer Memorial Playground, and then the Castle Park. You actually did a renovation in 2017 with the sales tax funds, and then you applied $300,000 from the sales tax towards the project to fully reconstruct Castle Park. So that's the 2 playgrounds. And then the final project, the airport runway, that is the full runway reconstruction that I've recently posted the drone flyover videos for on the city's Facebook page. We now have a 4,500 foot by 75 foot brand new concrete runway that we've been working on for the better part of 15 years, and that is scheduled to open in early November. So that's what the sales tax has paid for historically out of those capital improvement and sales tax, capital improvement and street components. The other item, or the other thing that the sales tax does for you, if I can find the right attachment, is these lower 2 items, which is 10% goes to the general fund, which is your largest property tax fund, and then 20% towards property tax reduction. So the way that these function is you have about 30% total, or as you can see the numbers over here, $510,000 that go into your tax supported funds. And because that sales tax exists, you do not have to have a mill levy, a property tax mill levy that is 6.8 mils higher in order to pay for your general fund services. So if the sales tax goes away, you have to have more property taxes to offset that, or you have to eliminate that equivalent out of your operating budgets. And that's 12% of your budget. To put that in context, that's probably the entire amount of property taxes for your public works street division, your swimming pool, and part of parks. Or it means a pretty sizable chunk of staffing in some way, but you don't have a lot of extra staffing to go around. So it is a pretty sizable component. But I want people to understand that part of what sales tax does is reduce your property taxes because it's in the ballot measure to do that. Make sure I'm trying to make sure to cover some of the things that are showing up out there to try to bring clarity to these questions. This is not in addition to anything that currently exists. What's happening is you have a 1% sales tax that is scheduled to expire in 2026. So what you're voting on is, do you want to continue the sales tax for an additional 10 years beyond it, not add another 1% to what already exists? So if this passes, you are being charged the same sales tax rate that you've been charged for the last decade. So that's an important component as well. Council, can you think of, because I know I get questions on this, we're going to start putting out more content. We have the online portal live now. I'll probably do some additional outreach on social media. I'd like to try to get in front of more people in person and get that information out there. But are there any other questions or things that you're hearing that I can speak to or maybe try to answer on this tonight?
I keep getting the question, why don't we tell them what streets we're going to work on with this tax? And we have a plan that we have had an engineering firm develop, and we have a street sales tax committee made up of public that go over these, and they make those recommendations to us. So it's a long-term plan, and we've covered a bunch of it so far. We're making good progress on it in the last 5 years.
Yeah, so I did an analysis that was a big project I worked on for the city probably in 2012, I don't know, maybe 2013 timeframe. And it was basically trying to look at this situation and say, how do we make progress so the dollars aren't changing, but how do we stretch them further and be more effective with how we're using the money? And one of the observations from that report, and this is combined with data from the engineer's report, was you have a street network of 54 miles of streets. When we looked at the street conditions at that time, we had, I think, an estimated outstanding deferred maintenance need of like $14 or $15 million. And we were generating about $450,000 to $500,000 a year from the sales tax. So what that means is at that very day, assuming that your street stayed in the same condition and never changed, you had 28 years to 30 years of need based on the amount of money that you were bringing in. That's if the street stayed in the same condition and didn't get any worse. So the reality of the situation is, and this is true of any city, is you do not bring in enough money to fix everything that exists. You do not generate enough to fix everything that exists. And so what that forces you to do is you have to prioritize in some way. You only have a limited amount in any given year. And so you have to choose which projects you're going to do. The method that the City of Augusta has chosen is you appointed a citizen committee to oversee that process with guidance and feedback and input from your street staff, from your city engineer. And what we did years ago is we asked the question of how do you stretch that money further? Because we were chasing bad streets in failed conditions and basically putting all of it into one or two streets. And so maybe you got a few blocks at a time. The question was asked, though, is that the best way to use the money? And what came out of that process was, no, we should be focusing more on preservation activity, catching streets at important trigger points before they degrade so far that the repair costs more than it should. Can you do preservation activities at those trigger points to extend the life of the streets? So it was a total shift in perspective. And we went back to those citizen committees. They approved the idea of these preservation activities and then selected a big bucket of streets and street projects that would fall under that. And so for the last 5 years, probably 4 to 5 years, we have been working our way through that bucket list of all of those preservation projects. One of the things I'm going to add to this portal is historical information on the street improvements that have been done, because one of the critiques you see is like, why are they all on the north side of town? It's because all of the south side was done first back in the 1990s and then into the 2000s. The north side hadn't been touched in 30 years. So that's why, because Here's a map of the street reconstructions, including the brick reconstructions going back to the 1990s. You can see all of the color coding is Lakewood Estates, Belmont South, and then south of Kelly. All of these crosshatches, those were the first things done in those programs. But as you recall, it's a 30-year rotation to touch all of your streets. We're 30 years later. That's why we're up on the north side now working our way back down, because that's the life cycle of that circle and how much money we have to go around. So these maps are available. You can see what was historically done. So this was 1990 to 2005. Here's the map from 2006 to 2011. We did change engineers around that time frame, so I don't have a good updated map from 2012 on that looks like this. There will be this other map that I provide showing here's the highway projects that were done in that time period. And if council can recall our work sessions that we go through when we do our strategic retreat every single year, one of the things we talk about is the street sales tax program and the projects that are done and the financings, letting you know how all of that fits together. So I'll throw these images on there. This was the 2017 program, that entire neighborhood up north. Those were original streets from the 1990s, I believe. They hadn't received any maintenance since then. That's why they got maintenance, because they had reached the end of their useful life. The Niebler edition was the same way. The Lakewood Estates was the same way. This chart is mill and overlay and major reconstructions. I will make this map available, but here is what we've done under that sales tax since 2016, 2017. Anything that has color on it are streets that have received repair or reconstruction. So we're spreading that money all over town. You just don't see it all in the same year, and you see it rotate around town from year to year until we can make the loop. The most activity that we've seen is, again, preservation oriented. Is the microsurfacing treatments that it provides a seal, it provides an additional wear surface on the top. That is a less intensive repair, but it's a preservation activity at a trigger point where if you don't touch it, the cost to repair those streets shoots up 4 or 5 times. So you're catching them before they get to that position, trying to extend their life by 6, 7 years. That's the strategy. That's why you see what you're seeing around town. So all of this information is in council packets. It's all public. People can go and read it. It's on the website. I will organize it so everyone can see it. The information is there. You just have to seek it. And so I will make as much of it available as possible. I'll go wherever council wants me to go. We need to get the information out there, because the stories are not accurate about what's going on or how you've strategized. And so I just wanted to try to speak to that tonight as best I could.
Thank you, Josh.
Josh, quick question. So you said that the sales tax as it currently is and is proposed to be replaced accounts for about 6.8 mils worth of reduction in property tax.
That was probably based off 2024's number.
Yeah.
Because that'll change from year to year.
But if I'm understanding it correctly, the reality of it is this entire number represents a reduction in property tax, because if this funding doesn't exist, those funds come from somewhere else, or those projects don't happen.
Yes.
Or those other choices get made to not do other things.
Yes. And so that's an important point for people to understand. The property taxes you pay when you look at our budget and where that funding goes, that gets you some of the people in the streets division and covers their salaries and benefits.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the property tax is sufficient to pay. You also have supplemental funding in a fund called Special City County Highway. That comes from your state federal gas taxes. That funding provides the salary benefits costs for the other half of your people, and also for the equipment. So your dump trucks, your stripers, your loader, all of those things that do the maintenance work. So the other sources that are non-sales tax that you have in your budget pay for your people and your equipment. Sales tax pays for the projects. So if you don't have that, you don't have projects unless you replace that with something else.
So I was just doing math off of these numbers on here. And so roughly the streets and sidewalks alone at 50% at that estimated revenue, that's a little over 11 mils worth of value at this, using these calculations. And then the capital improvements represents about 4.53, general fund 2.26, and property tax reduction 4.57, which comes out to about 22 to 23 mil equivalent. And so if the sales tax were not to be continued, we would be looking to replace 22 to 23 mil equivalent in funding to continue at our current operation, or we would be looking to make some tough decisions on what not to continue.
Yes.
Is that fair? Okay.
That's correct.
The other question I've got for you, and I don't know if you mentioned it, but the timing of this, why it's on the general ballot now, as opposed to waiting until 2026 when it would automatically expire and need to be renewed.
So several different reasons and strategies in that is one, it's such a critical component of your budget that you probably don't want to wait until last minute to know whether it's going to exist past its expiration date. So that's just the first reason for getting in front of people now. Two, you have a general election already occurring, and by piggybacking the ballot measure question on that general election, you don't have to pay additional money to do a special mail-in ballot separate. So it saves money. In the past, the county has estimated like $10,000 to $15,000 for a mail-in ballot election. So it saves that money by piggybacking on an existing election. You also, maybe from a transparency or democratic perspective, have a higher participation in a general election than maybe a standalone mail-in ballot. So you're encouraging more people to voice their opinion on it and vote.
Okay.
So there's all of those elements. The fourth element, I would say, is our approach to street improvements has not been 1 year myopic in that way. We don't wait until that year to decide what we're doing. We look several years down the road and we say that here is a list of improvements we need to make. Do we have utility work that needs to go along with that we can get done ahead of time? And then we start prepping our packages. And what we've been doing is, rather than paying cash, we've been doing 3-year short-term temporary note issuances. That allows us to scale up the projects to like $1.5 million and generate more interest from contractors and get better pricing out of contractors than if we're doing a much smaller project 1 year at a time. So knowing that the sales tax will continue past 2026, rather than us waiting for 2 years and not doing any more projects, we can start planning those next projects and get them in the works now if we know that that funding is going to exist. So that would be my 4 bullet points on why that timing is relevant and why we're doing it the way that we're doing. And a fifth would be that if it's not successful, you have time to either, one, adjust your budgets and start planning for that new reality, or 2, considering looking at the language and amending it and seeing if there's anything that your community would pass. So it gives you an opportunity to do that so you're not under the gun.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I think it's important, Josh, that you do put that on the website. I appreciate you doing that. I hope people will go to that website and look at it. I hope they'll seek it out. 31 miles of street repair sounds great to us, but if you live in the 24 that haven't been repaired, it doesn't feel like we're making progress. And I think that's the issue, because people who live in the 24 that hasn't been done yet don't usually drive over to the part that has been done. And if we know we're on the list, if we know it's coming, and we had an idea of when, I think that would be very, very helpful, but it's just, the 300 block of Clark is just horrific, and I'm getting beat up on that a lot, but
200.
200 block. Yeah,
200.
it's just horrific, and I'm getting beat up a lot on that. I walked down there, took a bunch of pictures of it, but if we can, and I know we got away from the worst first theory, and I understand why, because in the long run, it saves the city money, and I get it, and I'm for that, but sooner or later, we got to get back to some of those that are just, and the feedback from them is, I know it's bricks. We don't care if you asphalt it. That was the feedback I got from that neighborhood. And so just throwing some ideas out there, and I hope that 1% passes so that we can get to the next 24 miles.
Mr. Moore, do you have anything else tonight?
No, sir.
Mr. Davis?
I do. Josh, I know the airport's getting closer to being completed. Has the airport advisory board started looking at companies to try to bring in to lease spaces to? Have they? And the other thing is, does that go before council if they make a decision to XYZ aircraft company comes in, wants to lease a whole bunch of buildings or maybe even put up another building?
Yeah, so multiple questions there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I rambled on.
So where it's at now is staff is doing work off of a solicitation that was sent out as like interested proposals, and are reviewing those, and will be making some thoughts and recommendations presentation to the advisory board. Ultimately, any leases, commercial leases that are done out there, the council will have to approve that. It's a lease with the City of Augusta. But the idea of the advisory board's involvement is for them to review those things, make recommendations, and provide any advice that they may have before it gets up to you.
Thank you. The other thing I just want to say is kind of piggyback on what Shane said and Josh. This went out with your mailer for your bill. It's pretty self-explanatory. There's no smoke and mirrors, secret organizations, or anything like that. You can take a look at this thing, and it's pretty much, I was going to say black and white, but it's got multiple colors on it. So no backroom deals. It's right out in front of everybody to look at, with no secrets. So that's all I got to say.
Kip?
Did we get the signs ordered and stuff for the electric chargers down here? And maybe I'm wrong. I thought we were going to order signs so that we could limit, because we got 2 cars that sit there all the time.
How did that get resolved?
You and I worked on it, and we came to the conclusion we would need an ordinance passed. And then we got into budget session, and you and I couldn't decide on the verbiage to go on the sign. It was crazy.
Yeah, 'cause I don't remember if there was, I'm trying to remember if there was council action taken on it or
No,
not. I
there
don't
was
recall. You had asked me a question on it.
You and I talked about it.
And the solutions could be different depending on what you're wanting to do.
Right.
So when those chargers were put in, the feedback was those aren't the sort of chargers that you, I don't think at the time they had the ability to retrofit to put charging capability on them. So the question is, how are you trying to create the turnover in the vehicle traffic? And is it with the pay for charge? Is it with potentially, so some of the ideas I think I threw out to the mayor is, do you set 2 parking meters out there, and then you have to pay just to occupy the space, and then that's independent of the charger? Or do you just mark the spaces in such a way that says, please turn over your car, and hopefully have voluntary compliance? So we threw out several different ideas, but I don't remember there being a resolution to it or anything coming to the governing body yet. So if you'd like to, I can't remember, maybe we did have a conversation, and I'm just.
I feel like in the whole thing when Kansas Power Pool came and spoke to us about that and things, I just feel like what we're doing right now is not what the intention was for it. I think it was to hopefully people would be coming through and they would stop and be in our downtown and go eat in our businesses and things. And right now we got 2 cars that are sitting there all the time charging it for their personal use.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like that's not that's not best use of what we wanted those for and things. And I'm almost to the point of I'd rather get rid of them than just let them sit there for somebody's personal vehicle charger use.
I tend to agree with that.
It's up to you guys.
And I agree with that too, unless we could do a QR code there that charged them while they were sitting there and they're paying money, that's might be different. That might motivate them to leave or cover a cost, you know?
Yeah, I think that I'm trying to remember because we provided you information on what it was costing, and the cost is not significant.
It's
I think
minimal.
as part of that follow-up, it was, can you retrofit those to do the charge? And I think the cost to retrofit them is more than what the actual energy loss
Right.
was to make them chargeable. So I remember providing that data, just I can't remember the follow-up discussion on what do we do with it now.
A 3-hour, 4-hour limit on there somehow?
I would almost say that with the news of what Casey's is doing, why have them downtown? Because Casey's is right across the road and
I
going to have
would
fast
agree to that.
chargers and have the capability to charge and do all this, like charge a fee for that service, right? That may be a,
So I'm going to make a motion that we get rid of the electric vehicle chargers downtown here by the park.
I mean, I'll second it if we're in that part of the business meeting right now.
We can still do it.
What was the motion? Could you repeat it?
That we get rid of the electrical vehicle chargers downtown here by the park. Since they're going to put them in at Casey's and stuff, so they're going to be the faster ones, the level 3, which does it twice as fast as what these things are.
Well,
Right now-
significantly faster than that even.
I'm sorry?
It's significantly faster than that even.
When are they supposed to get them in at Casey's though?
I have no idea.
It'll be several months. Was there a second?
I second it.
Yes.
Okay, I thought I heard that.
I guess I just don't see the minimum amount of electricity those chargers use. If you can limit it to, 3 hours or 4 hours. And I don't know, you go to a Tesla fast charger, it's 15, 20 minutes, like up in Emporia in Kansas City or whatever, which these are definitely not that. I just think that it's a good tool for the city to use for minimal investment and minimal costs.
If it was doing what it was supposed to do.
I don't see the ROI yet.
Right.
Like, I don't see the turnover in bringing traffic to the downtown and doing anything like
If
that.
it was doing what it's supposed to be, what it was meant to do, and they were spending sales tax money here, drawing the sales tax money, my opinion would be different.
Right. Exactly.
So I guess my
I feel like
question
they're
is,
abusing it.
and maybe, well, people abuse everything, but you don't just pull it.
I'm not pulling it based on that initial cost. I'm pulling it based on just, I think it's not a winning project.
How about this? I know we have a motion on the floor and we're talking about it, but we could turn those off and not rip them out of the ground right now.
Yeah.
Because to rip them out, it's going to cost us money to cover up the electrical that's there. But we can turn them off really easy and just put a sign out of use and try that for a while. And then that would give us time to think about, could we put signage on them? Could we put a parking meter in front of them and charge the people to stay
Because I
there?
really think.
I'm okay with that as well.
Yeah, the charging is, the cost is the issue, correct?
But not for me. Like, I'm
It's
looking at it's not a model that seems to be, we don't have an enforceable way to create turnover so that there's a new user. And so we've got just the same base users using it that are not new to the community. So you're not bringing new people in to charge to create business in the
Right.
city. So I think that's where I know that the cost is a consideration, but that's not my driving factor.
Okay.
I think the driving factor for me is where Kip's comment was, where if we're simply just creating an opportunity for somebody who lives local to just go plug in and go to work or go plug in and go to bed while their car charges, and that's not visitors to our town, that's not the model.
That wasn't.
That's not the
That's not the
intent.
intent.
But I hate to see us rip them out.
I agree.
I think there's a better way, but yeah, so I think amending the motion, I'd be open to that, to just pausing it.
Can I just throw out just a
Yeah.
component to think about? So The city did not pay for those chargers. We got them for free from KPP providing them as their project, their pilot project essentially, or the introduction of that technology. So there may be a component, since they provided that, if we're yanking it out. I mean, we may want to talk to that partner that provided that to you. And if we do end up taking them out, can they find a use? Do they have other communities that'll take them? Like not just trashing that because it was given to us. And maybe think about that component and take a step that gives you a little bit of time to at least ask some questions on how would they see that being handled, and could they possibly reuse them or something.
I think it's a fair approach. I do think that when those initially were discussed, the idea was it was going to put these chargers in downtown, that was going to put Augusta on a map that was essentially a service map across the nation of where people that used electric vehicles could go charge.
And we are on that map.
And correct, right. That was the intent, was to get us on that map, to bring people to the community to do those things that we just talked about, right? So that was the intent. And so I think with the advent of the news that we hear is coming with Casey's, we will continue to be on the map when Casey's is operational. So pausing or going to KPP seem appropriate, but I just think status quo doesn't seem appropriate.
On that same word, Jake, we're on the map now. Why don't we use it as a revenue source? I mean, can't we change it?
I don't think we could based on the KPP implementation.
Yeah, the custom.
If you go to the original staff, and that's what I'd sent out to everybody, was the original staff report, is the units that they had. And I don't know if it was just at the time, and maybe they've changed that now, but I don't think that they had the ability at that time to charge off of those particular units. Maybe there's a retrofit now or something you can do, but that has a cost to it. But again, you guys have seen the numbers and seen what the retail capability is. It's never going to be a moneymaker because it's not a whole lot of electricity going through it. I believe that report that I sent you says if you were to charge retail, it was maybe like $1,500 or something over the course of a year is what that was generating. If you're looking at what it cost, the cost of electricity is less than that. So if you're saying it's a lost cost, then maybe it's half of that over the course of a year. But as a revenue generator, it doesn't necessarily do that for you.
Yeah. And the Casey's, I've talked to our superintendent of the power system there. I believe there's a transformer he has to order that may take them 3 months to get. And so once Casey's gives the city the permit to do that, which they have to buy a permit, we order a transformer. It's going to be 3 to 4 months before we get that and install it. So it's not like it's going to be tomorrow morning that they're going to be turning those on. So
I like the idea of talking to them and about taking them back or doing something else with them. Maybe they have ideals that we haven't thought of about how we can get a turnover on there. Other than that, once Casey gets theirs in, I have no problem with it.
Okay.
I'll amend my motion to make it that we shut the power off to those, and then you authorize the city manager to talk with Garrett's Power Pool and see what the alternatives are for those chargers.
I second that.
Okay. Does that sound all legal? Okay. All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, we had when we spoke some about the sealing of the streets. I was looking at one, I got a call from a resident down on Alice Street. And I went down and looked, and I looked across on the other side of Money, east of Money and things also. And I don't know if Michael or Anthony and those need to kind of go down and look at some of those, but it seems like the workmanship, and I'm not even just talking about how it looks, but the workmanship, there was areas down through the middle of it they didn't cover. There's around the intersections, there's places that didn't get covered with the seal and things. I just feel like that those are left exposed and they're not going to do what we went, with the intention of, or the money we paid for to get it
So
done.
they have a punch list, and I'm not sure that they've completed the punch list yet, but the
Okay.
punch list involves going back to those locations that were identified. So if it's, sometimes like a tire, if someone was making a turning movement, picks that up and takes it back down to the bare asphalt or something like that underneath. Those were noted on a punch list for them to go back and finish sealing. I don't remember what their schedule was for the punch list. I don't think that they had done it yet, but let me go and verify with staff and see if they've done that yet. And if you guys have particular locations you want us to check on, I will make sure to get that forwarded to the streets division and see if that's already on their punch list or not. And if not, see if we can potentially get it added.
The south
I
end
agree
of
on that.
Alice Street was what
So Alice, was
seen
there
their
any?
stuff. Yeah.
Alice is one, and there's one over.
If, it'd be good to email those addresses, okay?
I'll email.
Please, if you know of any, do it quickly. Get them to me quickly so I can
Absolutely.
try
'Cause
to catch them before.
I think they were supposed to start the punch list the first or second week of October.
It's possible. Yeah, we're right in that time frame. I just don't think that they had finished it yet. So.
Thank you. And the last thing that I had was over the weekend, we had the Faith in Blue at Garvin Park. It was a really nice time, a great idea and things and stuff, interaction between the safety department and the community and the churches and things. And I just wanted to say thank you to the safety department, all the people in the community and the churches for participating in that and being a part of that, because I think it was a real success. And for the officers that went to the churches and things over the weekend and stuff, I think that was really a awesome move to try to have some commonality and some interaction and stuff between our officer, our safety department, and the members of our community and stuff to improve that relationship. So thank you.
Mayor and Council, apparently our street superintendent is still watching us. He just texted me and said Alice is on the punch list already.
Great. Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, Anthony.
Shane?
Quick.
Yes, I just want to thank the street workers for addressing Mr. Kramer's concerns from the last meeting and getting that done and cleaning it up. And I went over there and it looks really good.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys want me to take time on this. I can't tell you, we're doing a lot in the sidewalk ADA realm of things right now, but it's kind of building towards a much bigger effort and much bigger project. So what Streets did is we recently got our brand new street sweeper that we made sure to spec that it has capabilities of weed and grass removal and brooms that can actually reach out and work on the ADA ramps and other sort of things. So we bought a specialty broom that can hit those areas and do that sort of work, because doing it by hand is very inefficient. So they did their first test runs specifically in that area. We are actively working on our ADA transition plan update, which evaluates all of our buildings in the community, the public access areas, and also our park facilities, outdoor trails, and our pedestrian infrastructure. I am also actively working on the RFP document that JEO had helped prepare that's related to the Safe Streets for All program. That program, once we get it submitted, we got a grant for it, will do a project planning of the pedestrian infrastructure all throughout town and help identify project needs, maintenance needs that we can start organizing our budgets and repairs around. And it'll also open us up to funding opportunities through other grant programs. Then comes to the sales tax, which council had modified the language on to allow for funding to be used on sidewalks, which, if it passes, can be used directly, but also can be leveraged in similar ways to what we've done with streets to apply for other grants specifically to scale up sidewalk improvements. So you guys have been setting up an infrastructure of process and program and finances to be able to tackle this issue in a holistic way. You have very specific complaints and needs, but the approach to the repair has been building towards having an abundance of resource to try to do this in a much bigger way. So we'll continue to have those complaints and try to work through them as best we can. But public at home, please know the council and the city have been building to something substantial in regards to the walking infrastructure in town.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bob?
I had a conversation with a gentleman last weekend and about the flock system. So the chief might be better equipped to answer this, but he's concerned because evidently there's a town, I can't remember the name of the town, that it was misused at. And so do we have any programs in place to keep that from happening here? And
Yes,
it's
we
kind
do.
of rough.
I assured you guys that when we first took in the system, that it is monitored. All of our officers and anybody had access to it, like dispatch have access, have to sign agreements as well for the use of and such.
Okay.
We do have penalties for that. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted him to hear it from you.
Yep,
And-
we took care of that already. When that first happened, the thing, we pay for each other's sins when it comes to law enforcement, and we already got ahead of that one.
Okay, good. Could you give a rough breakdown of what it's helped with for
Of
the
what?
city? Of what it's done for the city?
Yeah, I can put together a report. Matter of fact, I gave Josh one as well, the year of everything that we've done with it. From tracking, we track people all the time. It's used every week, looking for people that are in chases or people that are can't be found, a walk away, or unattended deaths. We find out when people come into town, when they got home, stuff like that. It's used all the time, not just for traffic. It's used for all kinds of investigations, as long as the vehicle's involved.
Chief, that report you're referring to, did we discuss that in the budget work sessions?
We
Is
did.
that- Okay,
Yes.
and the reason being is because we originally got grants to install those, but once those grants run out, you have to make the decision to financially continue supporting them. And so there was a report that went out that summarized all of the different cases. I can dig that back out and see if we can find it, but I think it's in the budget work session packets. And if so, then the people at home can even see that as well. 'Cause
Yes,
it
it's a
was
public
attached.
document. Those are the major pieces. We don't put everything in there because we'd just be making a list every week of everything we use it for. We have 6 cameras currently, 2 north up on Ohio, 2 south here on the south side of 77 going out, and 2 over by Walmart, because we're pretty heavy about getting ripped off at Walmart, and they head right back west again. So we've got those. With the new budget of next year, we're adding 2 cameras on the east end. That'll give us total security all the way around the town for the most part.
Haven't you used them to find some runaways or?
Oh, yes, yeah. Runaways from here and Wichita, we'll find
Kid-
them over here, but it's
kidnap.
usually has to be tied to the vehicle so we can get the vehicle itself. And they're adding new programs to it, like traffic counting and all kinds of stuff. But what it comes down to is they want to sell you another program to add to the camera system. So it just depends what we can afford.
Thanks. I just wanted, he watches this and I wanted him to hear it from you.
Sure. Yeah, it's not a
It
problem. Yes,
carries
they're not
more weight
cheap.
than it comes from just me.
Yeah, they're
That's
$3,000
forever.
a piece per camera every year. So they're not cheap at all. But if you go to the center of Wichita and go 50 to 60 miles out, there's over 500 of these cameras now all across the whole area. And it's getting easier to find people, at least the vehicles that they're looking for.
Thank you.
And we can search them, not just by license plate. If you have, say, a pickup that's got a different colored fender, we can search by that now too. There's all kinds of things we can search for. It's not just license plate anymore. IA is great in some spots.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
You betcha.
Eric?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Mike?
I have a few things.
Okay.
The homecoming parade I've heard a lot of good compliments on that downtown. A lot of people were really having a good time and the floats were cool. Police department was very well represented there and the fire department was putting fires out down there. It was really cool. There's a house on Summit and Helen, the corner. It would be the southeast corner. It needs a haircut real bad. I don't know if Cammie, you need to know that, or how does the limb yard, we're on a Monday, Tuesday, the limb yard's closed, right?
I don't recall. I'll probably tell you the wrong answer if
For
I do
the
answer.
summertime
Yeah,
or
it's
something like
closed on
that?
Mondays and
We're gonna be
Tuesdays and
going to
open the
winter
rest of the
pretty
week.
quick, probably.
I think the switch normally happens in November, if I remember the schedule.
I had
November
a
and into
complaint
March.
about the limb yard being full on Wednesday there was somebody wanting to dump and they couldn't dump because there was a bunch of limbs in it and grass and stuff.
It's possible. So that loader that we're replacing, that's what turns that limb yard over. So the
I mean,
new
I
loader
just
we're
make a
trying to
point
get,
of it,
that's the primary piece of equipment that moves all of that.
That street sweeper you were talking about, the new rig, I came into town. I come in about 6:30 every morning, come over the overpass, and somebody was in that thing going east on the overpass. That thing can go fast. I mean, it will go fast. I'm used to seeing the old one slow, you know. That sucker was hauling, and I don't know if they were testing out the cobs in it or what, but it was moving.
Everything we're doing at this point in time is all testing because
Yeah, it was
official training I don't think happens until maybe next week. So
Looked
our
like a
guys have been
modified
figuring it out.
dragster. It was pretty cool. And the north lane on the overpass is getting really bad. There's some nice big holes in it it's been filled 2 or 3 times, but they're getting bigger. And again, I'd like to see if we could get our agenda out any earlier in the week if possible. I got mine at 7:30 on Friday night from an email, which I don't know. I could have maybe gotten it earlier. I don't know. I don't go to the website.
That's when I finished it.
Yeah, I just I'd really like to see about getting them earlier. I'd like to study them a little bit and don't have any time. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Kip, you're on.
All right. I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session for 15 minutes to discuss a developer's agreement, including terms affecting liability and release of liability pursuant to the consultation with an attorney for the public body or agency. It would be deemed privileged, and the attorney-client relationship justification for executive sessions under the Kansas Open Meetings Act.
Second.
KSA 75-4319B2, and divided in City Manager Josh Shaw, Assistant City Manager Cammie Schroff, and City Attorney Andrew Marino. The opening meeting will resume in the council chambers at 9:50 p.m.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
If you took a breath and I thought you were done.
I didn't slow down, did I? No, not for after that.
Good to see you. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Ooh, Royals are at 4-1 at the top of the ninth. Yep.